What's going on, yo? It's your boy Cuban Mic. You listen to 102.9 Tape Deck. And tonight, I have a real special guest in the building. When I tell you it's an honor and a privilege to have him in the building, it's an understatement. I had this fine gentleman on my show, I want to say 3 times, and it was all through Zoom. And every time I asked him for a call to come through, there was no hesitation, no problems with it. And, you know, he was a go-to person I need to when it talks about the current events when it comes to Cuba, whether it was what happened last year on March 20th, and even he was going, you know, with a situation where somebody was trying to slander his name, and I had no problem watching his bag, getting his bag, and him telling his side of the story, what's going on. Coming straight from Florida, he's a community leader, a treasure to the community. And when I tell you we must protect this man at all costs, we must protect this man at all costs. He took his time, his busy schedule to come through on the tape deck. And it's an honor and a privilege to have Orlando Gutierrez-Boronat in the building. What's going on, buddy?
It's a fine day. I've been with my people here in Boston, with Regla, with Jordan, with you. And I'm very glad to be in the show. I like how you carry out the show. And I think you're one of the new generation leaders of the Cuban community in the United States, and I love your commitment to a free Cuba.
That means a lot coming from you, man. And before I continue on with the continuum, I got to give one big special shout out to Regla to make this happen. She's been like the ultimate plug, and you know I try to be the fighter, but when I have to look at Felita, she's really one of the go-to person to go to. When I tell you that woman is resilient, she is super, uber, duper resilient. So big shout out to Regla. This is your first time in Massachusetts?
No, I've been to Boston like 3 times before, but the last time I came to Boston was in 1999.
Oh, so like last century pretty much.
That's right. Hey, does your audience know you gave one of the best speeches at one of the most important Cuban-American conferences in the past decade?
Well, we're about to get to that in a second because I wanted to tell the story. Just a couple of weeks ago, honor and a privilege to have an invite to speak at the event. You know, I got a chance to, you know, speak on my side of the story and, you know, the struggle and tribulation we go through in Massachusetts. So it was an honor to be part of that podium with, you know, with a bunch of warriors around me. Thank you.
You gave a stellar speech. Everybody was talking about it. And, you know, that room was packed full of Cubans.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had to walk out for stuff I was coordinating at the moment. And people told me, hey, this kid from Boston, man, he speaks really well.
Yeah. When I tell you I was like beyond nervous, and Rene had to like calm me down because, you know, I had a crazy morning before that. Like, there was issues going on with my car, and I thought I lost my speech, and it was a lot going on that morning that, you know, even when I got to the stage, I wasn't able to just like calm down. So, but it was a little bit nerve-wracking. And the funny thing about me, as much as I love talking, I have a kryptonite, and that is speaking to the public. Speeches is like the biggest kryptonite. I don't know what it is. You can put me to a podcast. I could perform your song. I'll do some spoken words. But whenever it's a speech, like, I got to talk? And I got to speak Spanish? Oh.
It's not easy.
It's not easy at all. But enough about me, sir. Let's get to you. You know what's insane? We've been communicating for the last year and a half, and you have so much going on that I didn't even know, like, your story. And to this day, I still don't even know your story. I just get you on the show, you tell me the current events, and boom, we out of here, man. But I really want to get to know you, and I want my audience to get to know you and your story. So I guess I got to start off. Who is Orlando Gutierrez-Boronat, and how did this journey all came about?
Well, Orlando Gutierrez-Boronat is an American with a Cuban heart.
Yeah.
I come from a big Cuban family that's been in Cuba for centuries. Some of my ancestors were already there when the Spanish arrived. I left the territory of Cuba with my parents in 1971. I was 5 years old. We went to Spain, spent about a year in Spain, then flew to Nicaragua, spent about a year in Nicaragua, then finally we made it to the U.S. I turned 7 in the U.S. about a week or 2 after I got here. And I grew up outside the island of Cuba, but within the spiritual space of the Cuban nation. Glad to have made it to the U.S. Very thankful for all the good things this country has given us, all the opportunities, the fairness, the rules, the laws, the order, the American dream. But I can't forget my people back home. I can't forget the people in Cuba and the vicious system they're suffering under, and what communism means. And I began to realize, as I grew older in the United States, I began to realize what had really happened why we had left Cuba, what had been done to my family. I began to read Cuban history, understand the kind of betrayal the Cuban people suffered, that they believed in a revolution that turned out to bring a worse dictatorship than the one that they had struggled against. I saw the damage done to my own people. And I decided at a very early age, as is, Cubans grow fast. Cubans, were raised on strength, were raised to assume responsibility really quick. And so at a young age, I began to say, I want to do something to help Cuba be free. I mean, I'm going to study, I'm going to succeed in this country, but I want Cuba to be free. And I want to do everything I can to contribute to that. So I had family already involved in the liberation struggle for Cuba. And I began to participate in the organizations. I became very active. And in 1990, we organized an international congress of free Cubans for a free Cuba, of young free Cubans for a free Cuba. And there we decided to create a new directorio, directorate. Why directorio? In the history of in Cuban history, there's been a beautiful tradition of student movements that fought for democracy, for social justice, for human rights. And every time one of them was organized, in 1927, in 1930, in 1955, in 1960, every time one of them was organized, they took the name Directorio. Either Directorio Revolucionario Estudiantil or Directorio Estudiantil Universitario. And so in 1990, we took up that mantle, we took up that tradition, and we created a new Directorio, which at that moment in time was called the Cuban Revolutionary Democratic Directorate. Later on, we dropped the word revolutionary because it had been too stained and sullied by the dictatorship in Cuba. And today, we are the Cuban Democratic Directorate. It's been 35 years since that date when we founded the organization. And from day one, our goal was to work with civil society inside Cuba, with Cubans courageous enough to organize themselves independently of the state. And people don't really understand what happens in Cuba. I mean, the regime controls everything or tries to control everything and tries to crush anybody they can't control. So to have the courage to rise and organize and try and speak and try to advocate for democratic change, that takes a lot of guts. And we decided to help that movement in Cuba, whatever form it took. And our second goal was to create an international network of solidarity, people to people, across borders, with the people in Cuba who were standing up for change. Our third goal was to inform the Cuban people. And from very early on, we began radio broadcasts into Cuba. Those radio broadcasts have grew into a station called Radio República, which transmits 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to Cuba on shortwave, on social media. Sometimes we do some AM. There's a lot of AM Cuban in Miami. There's still a culture of that. And our other goal was to preserve Cuban national culture, to preserve and rescue Cuban history, that our identity should not die. That doesn't put us in conflict with the United States. We feel very much American, but we also feel this country is big enough to nurture itself and to enrich itself with the different traditions that come and find sanctuary within its borders. So that was the start of the Directorio. It's been a long fight. We've made much progress against a regime that has the support of many powerful forces around the world. The fight of the Cuban people has been very lonely. But we're at a point in time now where the courage, the resistance, the defiance of the Cuban people has put that regime against a corner. And we're trying to pursue all the initiatives we can so that the regime ends. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. Along the path, along that way, I got my college degrees. I have a PhD in international studies. I've been a college professor. I've been a journalist. I've written 10 books, mostly on Cuba. I've been married. I have kids. So I have a life. I have a life that I built, a life based on my faith, on my spirituality. And I've tried to make it into a life of service to my lineage, my ancestry, which is the Cuban nation.
Well said. Author, I didn't even know you wrote books. Look at that. I learn something new about you every day. 10 of them.
I've written 10 so far, yeah.
Is it one you could recommend for me? It's like, do you treat them like your kids, like they're all my babies? Or is this a go-to that you could be like, you know what? This is the one that, this is like the equivalent of Jordan scoring 55 points at a game. Is it?
I highly recommend somebody like you, Michael, who's so involved in media, to read the last book I published called Cuba, the Doctrine of the Lie. It's published in English by Academia Press. And it's a story. It's not the story. It's the history of how Cuba was turned into a totalitarian state. And I think it's important for for leaders like yourself to understand what happened, how the regime established itself in Cuba, how the dictatorship was consolidated, and what they did to take absolute power. And I think I get into the deep narrative of how that happened.
Okay. So what were some of the colleges that you taught them about? I mean, like the colleges and schools you went through. Like, were you teaching stuff involving Cuba?
I taught for 10 years at Belen Jesuit Prep, which is a Catholic high school in Miami. I taught 9 years at Florida International University. I also went to Florida International University. I've received my undergraduate and master degrees from FIU.
Okay.
I was president of the Federation of Cuban Students at FIU, which was dormant, and then we revived it. And then I got a PhD in the philosophy of international relations at the University of Miami.
Oh, you're just a guy with many hats.
Yeah.
A guy with many hats. You know, I want to ask you
a busy Cuban.
Oh. You know, I want to ask you this because I had a professor here, well, not here, but I had her on my show, and she's a professor, and one of the uphill battles that I asked her what she had to go through being a professor, Cuban at that, you know, you just said something that was very, that just stuck out. You know, our battle has been a real lonely battle because it's just been like us versus the world. And her being a professor, you know, I asked her, what are the uphill battles she has to do? Because with colleges, they teach them to be very progressive, very liberal. So they like to teach a lot of propaganda when involving Cuba. I had a young lady on the show, and she was telling me her story. Well, I'll tell you the story. Last week, there was a controversy here in Boston where this school, elementary school, it was Hispanic Heritage Month, and there was the school, they were teaching, you know, all these like historical heroes, and they put Fidel Castro and Che Guevara as heroes. Now, mind you, like my friend told me this, and they told me, like I didn't go through this, but when she was in school, she was as young as 10 or 11, and they were teaching her, you know, during Black History Month that Fidel Castro was an ally towards black people. So this is the thing that she got until she met me. Then she learned something completely different. So now she realized, oh, this school was lying to me. But now they went through, you know, and I talked about it on the speech, they went after, you know, the college kids. Now they're going after the babies. So I guess I asked you, like, do you have to go any kind of like difficult task when you were teaching these kind of things?
That's a great question. I believe very much that a professor has to be objective. You got to teach things, the facts as you have researched them, as you know them. The students are the ones who have to come up with their own conclusions.
Yeah.
So I tried to be as much non-ideological as I could in class, because it really ticked me off when I was a student. When I had these professors trying to drum their ideology into my head, I reject that. You know, give me facts, give me tools to understand, but don't drum ideology into my head. I had enough of that in Cuba when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I tried to be as objective as I could, but also as profound as I could. And, you know, finding truth is not an easy task. It's not supposed to be an easy task. And there's a tired narrative about Cuba that's false. There's a bogus history of Cuba that has been invented in many academic publications to justify the existence of that regime, which is disconnected from the reality of the Cuban people. And there's a truth that comes from inside Cuba, and I believe that truth needs to be told, needs to get out, needs to be discussed, because I realized from very early on, Michael, there was a Cuba my grandparents and my parents had lived, and there was a Cuba in abundant exile literature, and there was a Cuba I could find through my own research. And then there was a Cuba that was being taught to me by professors who had not lived in Cuba, who did not even speak Spanish, who knew about Cuba through their ideology. And I said, man, wait, there's something completely wrong here, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it the life experience, the facts, the demonstrable realities of Cuba being cast aside and the ideological narrative having the priority? That's not a way to be scientific. Mm-hmm. That's not a way to find the truth. So I didn't want that. I did not want to, and I do not want to impose that on anybody who trusts me enough to be a student in my class. Mm-hmm. To this day, I have students that write to me, and we still discuss things, and I'm still engaged with them in the search for truth. So maybe I did something. Maybe I sparked that search for truth in my students, but I also apply that on a larger level to my own life and the struggle for the freedom of Cuba. Freedom is not freedom unless it's pursued as part of the search for truth. The freedom to seek truth is what elevates us, what makes us ascend. And that's how I see everything else.
Well said. Again, we talk about how being a Cuban freedom fighter has been not only a lonely battle, but also been an uphill battle. What has been the trials and tribulations you've been going through in regards to trying to bring this awareness across?
Nobody's ever asked me these questions before, Michael. So this is a deep interview.
Yeah, I'm trying to be like the next Monto Williams or something out here. So probably catch me in 60 Minutes the next year.
I'll tell you something. It's been a lonely struggle, but I am spiritually rich. I'm a spiritual millionaire because of that struggle. Mm. The kind of people I've met, the kind of quality I've seen the best Cubans have to offer. There's also been a lot of pain and struggle, a lot of people who've lost their lives, who've gone to prison. There's been physical and emotional blows that I have felt. But it's worth it if you're pursuing something that's real, something that's authentic. And what could be more real, more authentic than the God-given natural rights of the Cuban people, right? And today, the day we're recording the show, October 10, we're remembering the moment in 1868 when Cubans rose up in eastern Cuba in a town called Yara, in a farm called La de Majagua, and they stood up for their freedoms. And those were Cubans from all walks of life. Right?
Yes.
Farmers, professionals, black, white, Taino descent. They rose up and they said, hey, we're here to stand up for our God-given natural rights. Right? And we want to organize a government that respects the identity of our nation. Back then in 1868, they were already very clear on that. And to that glorious uprising that led to a 10-year struggle for independence, many Dominicans and Puerto Ricans joined to help their Cuban brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Right? From the outset, up to 200 Dominicans served in the Cuban Army of Liberation.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And from the very beginning, from the very first battle, you had Dominicans who were there with the Cubans fighting. The Marcano brothers, there were 3 Marcano brothers who were officers in the Cuban Army of Liberation. 2 of them died in the War for Free Cuba. Right? There was another great Dominican general, Modesto Diaz, and there was the greatest of all Dominican and Cuban generals, Máximo Gómez.
Oh, yes, I do remember that. My mom told me this. Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Generalissimo, yes. We still call him. What a great man that was. He fought 30 years for Cuban freedom.
Yes, yes.
So on that great day, and that's why Regla was very wise in choosing October 10th to raise that flag. On that day of October 10, 1868, Cubans raised their flag of independence. And almost a year later, they gave themselves a constitution. The first constitution of Cuba, of free Cuba. So we're following a very strong tradition. And the tradition of our country is that we have a very strong individual. I'll tell you something else. I'm going to get a little bit poetic here.
Go ahead.
Because you're inspiring me.
That's what we're here for.
That town was called, that farm was called De Majagua, of the Majagua. What is the Majagua? The Majagua is a very special tree that is found only in eastern Cuba and in Jamaica. It's a tree with a very beautiful flower, very vibrant red, colorful flowers that bloom, and it has this very strong wood that's good for construction, and it's also good for musical instruments. Doesn't that sound like a Cuban to you?
Of course.
Cubans are very extroverted, they're very bright, they're very attention-grabbing, but they're also very solid, a very strong character. Like Spengler said, talking about nations, a prolonged character, a duration of character within a given geographical setting. That's a nation. That's Cuba. And then the music. Cuba has always been a musical powerhouse. There's something about the vibrations and the world and what Cuba does with those vibrations that has set the world dancing. And the Majagua represents all that. The music, the strong character, and the brilliance, the light. So I always say, the problem with Cuba is mired in poverty, in blackouts, and lack of food, not because of Cubans. Everywhere Cubans go, they succeed. Right? Cubans don't succeed in Cuba because the Cubans know because of the communist system it doesn't work.
So, and it's been an ultimate failure also, man. I do want to get into that in a few because there's been a lot going on, especially with the political climate that's been going on here in the States and in Cuba. I'd be remiss if I wouldn't even talk about the your organization, the Assembly of Cuban Resistance. Can you tell my audience how that came about?
Well, the Directorio, the Cuban Democratic Directorate, was essential in formulating a document called the Agreement for Democracy in Cuba, El Acuerdo por la Democracia en Cuba. This is an agreement consisting of 10 points where the most part of the Cuban opposition has committed itself to 10 basic points for the transition. And out of that agreement was born eventually the Assembly of the Cuban Resistance, which is a coalition of 52 civil society organizations inside and outside Cuba who are unified in the pursuit of the true liberation of Cuba. And these 52 organizations are women's movements, youth groups, former political prisoners, veterans organizations, some political parties. It's a very diverse rainbow that reflects the natural plurality of the Cuban nation. The organizations that exist within Cuba are under great persecution, great pressure, like the ladies in white, who are a courageous group of mothers who stand up for their sons and daughters who are political prisoners. So that's a very important movement that's part of the Assembly. And the Assembly it's a parliament of the opposition. It's a parliament of the Cuban exile community, of the Cuban resistance. And every 3 years they have elections. I am the Secretary General of the Assembly, which brings together all these organizations. And in that conference that we had a few weeks back called Salvar Cuba, Saving Cuba, we had, you saw it, we had a broad representation, over 350 delegates of this great, vibrant civil society Cuba has.
Excellent.
Well, great, vibrant civil society under repression and persecution in Cuba, or alive and in exile and surviving from one generation to the next. Not an easy task.
I see that. I've seen you behind the scenes. You are just a non-stop moving man. Even when I saw you a couple of weeks ago, I was like, hail it.
I know, man. I'm sorry.
No, listen, I get it. You're on the move. You're on the move. So I'm like, let me get this kid.
But I was very glad to see you there.
I was happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. That panel you were part of was a powerhouse because you had all these young people like you who are succeeding and being an example in their different fields, and they came together in that panel to show us that there's a new generation of Cuban American leaders who are as committed to freedom in Cuba and as hopeful of achieving the reunification of the Cuban people as the older generations were.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, with the work that I do, I'll be able to carry tradition that you guys are doing at the moment. So 100 thank yous. We are living in very interesting times right now. I saw something on the news, and they had a statistic that, back in 2015, when you ask about, what are your thoughts of socialism and communism, it was a very low percentage rate. And then 10 years later, it became like a real crazy increase. And I don't want to say that we're living in scary times, but we are living in interesting times. What do you think about this whole phenomenon? We're having a situation with New York with the mayor coming up, and we all know what he's thinking at the moment. Is there a situation we should be scared of what's going to happen in this country at the moment? Because there's a lot of progressive, but we know that means something else, that's trying to kick this agenda. Should we be nervous at the moment?
I think all republics are fragile. I think freedom requires eternal vigilance. I think it was Reagan who said that. I'm not sure, but it's a good thought. If somebody along the way told you that a group of bureaucrats were the ones that guaranteed your freedoms and that your basic personal economic decisions can be left to that group of bureaucrats, if you've been taught that a group of wise people should gain control of your life to make you a better person, you've been lied to. You've been horribly lied to. The only one that can guarantee your own freedom is yourself, through your own abilities. There are basic rules. There are some basic things society should do for itself, the state should do. But the most important thing the state can do is respect and promote the freedom of the individuals or the citizens who compose that state. Socialism does not work. What they have in the Scandinavian countries is not socialism. They're democratic countries which have implemented many social welfare measures. But they don't believe in collective control of the economy. They don't believe in leaving the planning and the basic decisions of the economy to a small group of bureaucrats who are guided by ideology and not by facts. So I am concerned. About young people who are willing to give the socialism a chance when it's failed everywhere else. Take it from the Cubans. We had a prosperous republic. We had a thriving private sector. We had the most powerful labor union movement in Latin America. We had a country that was making great strides, a country that went from being devastated by civil war to being at the top of Latin America in less than 50 years. All right? That might sound a lot to you if you're young. It's not. It's nothing. All right? Look at Venezuela, prosperous, thriving country. Now, 9 million refugees in the world. Socialism does not work. That doesn't mean that brutal, savage capitalism is the only option. No. A republic with laws, with sovereignty, with federalism, that works. It really does work. Everywhere it's been tried, it has worked. All right? Look at Taiwan. Taiwan in 1949 was 10 times poorer than Cuba. Today is one of the world's leading economies. Mm-hmm. All right? Look at what they have achieved. Look at Botswana in Africa. Look what they have achieved. Look at Barbados in the Caribbean. Look at what's happening in the Dominican Republic. Year by year, it's getting stronger and better. All right? Freedom works. And there's no such thing as democratic socialism. Because socialism undermines democracy. When you have a small group of bureaucrats with all the power in the world, they will not stand for freedom. They will not stand for debate. When you have ideologues controlling bureaucrats, they're not going to stand for free speech. So I think that it's important not to give up causes of inclusion and plurality and equity and fairness. You can do all that without embracing communism, without embracing so-called democratic socialism, without embracing Karl Marx. Karl Marx gave the world a terrible, erroneous theory that has either killed or imprisoned millions.
And the beauty, I'm going to use this as an example because the beauty of this country, if we have an issue with our political figures, we could call them out, whether it could be music, radio station, television, comedy skits. Like, we have the luxury to do that. I mean, even today, I want to say congratulations for getting your recognition in Boston. I want to give a shout out to Ed Flynn for making that happen. There were certain people in the councilmen that had invitations, and for whatever reason, they didn't want to show up. I could give my 2 cents on why, but I could give my complaint with the city council and my displeased on how they've been doing the Cuban community dirty, and they don't want to listen to it when it comes to our struggle and our cry out for help. So this is the beauty I could have in this country. And I could easily call out names and not get in trouble because I have that freedom of speech. And I have to thank this country for it. I'm glad you brought up the fact that socialism doesn't work because I saw a video, and I hate the fact that I have to bring this up over and over again, but it sounds like a broken record because just when I think I have everything and everybody figure it out, there's something that I have to see on my phone, on TV, that gives me a reminder that I have to repeat what's going on in Cuba. I saw a video that really just grind my gear, and you're the perfect person to go to when it comes to the situation. The video says something to the effect that Cuba was just like a poor, stricken country. We were illiterate. We couldn't read. We were just a whole bunch of nobodies. And then came the revolution and saved us all. There's been a big misconception that, before this thing happened, we were just a whole bunch of nobodies and we couldn't read. We couldn't do anything. We have any money. Oh, it was just like the elite that just had it all and came Robin Hood and just gave back to the poor. Can you... I know it sounds like a record, but can you tell my audience on what's really going on? And even before, the reading level in the healthcare, I believe we had the top reading, system in Latin America pre-revolution. We were number one before this happened.
The Cuban peso was equivalent to the dollar. Cuba had the largest gold reserves in Latin America.
Yes.
The Cuban economy is growing by the day. We have political issues. Everybody goes through political issues.
Yes.
Right? There's not a country in the world when did Germany become democratic? After really fully democratic after World War II. Mm-hmm. When did France become democratic? When did Spain become democratic? When did Portugal become democratic? Or Greece? They had dictatorship all the way into the 70s. So yeah, we had political issues.
Yes.
But we had a thriving economy, a thriving culture. The country was an economic powerhouse in Latin America. a country that fed itself and exported food, the country in Latin America that had the highest percentage of land owned by peasants. 70% of Cuban peasants own some kind of land, right? A country that, Michael, I know you're into music.
Yeah.
By 1959, Cuba had developed 600 different genres of music.
I didn't even know that right now. So look at that.
600. You know, Plato said that you could always tell the magnificence of a nation by the music it generated. Mm-hmm. The fineness of the soul of a people. Well, then Cuba must have a very fine soul, because look what we've done in the world in terms of music, in terms of vibration. 600 genres of music, from classical to modern to jazz. Look at Cuban art, Cuban literature.
Yeah.
And what was achieved in Cuba? It was tough. I'm not saying it wasn't tough. It was very tough. But independence was the best option for Cuba, for the growth of Cuba. And independence was especially the best option for black Cubans. Mm-hmm. Literacy rates skyrocketed for the black population after independence. Right? Black Cubans occupied the positions in leadership and politics and culture and society that they should have, and a very syncretic society. Right? Very different in many ways. Look, I have no hesitation in saying a black person had a lot more freedom, enjoyed their freedoms of a citizen in Cuba in the 1950s that maybe somebody in Mississippi didn't. All right? So Cuba could stand toe-to-toe with southern states with regards to what it was achieving. What it was achieving in democracy, in literature, in literacy, in medicine before 1959. We had a big issue. We had a big problem, especially after the 1930s, which was that the army got involved in national politics too many times. At first, the army did so in the name of social justice, right? Mm-hmm. We had a president who was a man of many accomplishments, but also a man who did many bad things. Fulgencio Batista, he was a Cuban mestizo, mulatto. He did great things and he did very bad things, right? But under his helm, the army became more and more involved in politics. And that was something Cubans wanted to end. They wanted civilians to rule the country, and they wanted free elections where Cubans could choose their leaders. And especially after a coup that took place in 1952, that became a more and more pressing issue and problem. The country was growing economically, the country was growing technologically, but it was lagging politically. So Cubans felt that difference between their economic, cultural, social growth and their political underdevelopment, let's call it that, was too much for them to bear. And so the Cuban middle classes, which was huge, Cuba had the largest, most powerful middle class in Latin America, had the largest, most powerful black middle class in any Latin American country. People said it's time for change. And through a series of mistakes that Batista made, that the U.S. government made, Castro became the leader. But from day one, he sought to create a totalitarian dictatorship. He sought to crush that country so he could rule it. And that's what he did, and I can prove it. Empirically, I can show you what was done to crush that country. All right? To eliminate civil society, to wreck the economy so it depended on the state, so people had to depend on the state for food, to take away the land and the power to grow to grow the agriculture and to pursue their own interests of the Cuban farmers. It's been a disaster. Yeah. A disaster that has wrecked a Latin American country that was succeeding. Cuba was, on average, Cuba was generating more electricity per year before 59 than after 59, for example. All right? Yeah. Cuba was feeding itself. Today it has to import everything it eats. Why does that happen? The embargo doesn't cover food. It doesn't cover agriculture. Why does that happen in society? Because the regime doesn't care. The regime only cares about staying in power and serving the ideology of the regime. I want to ask you, what are Cuban soldiers doing now fighting for Russia against Ukraine? Did you know that?
I knew that, but my audience doesn't, so please break it down for them.
20,000 Cuban troops sent to Russia to fight for Russia against Ukraine. Isn't that an imperialist war?
Yeah. Yes,
that's an imperialist war. Yeah. It's a war of a large, powerful empire against a tiny country that wants to live its own life. Why are Cubans dying for that? I've been to Ukraine. I've interviewed Cubans who were prisoners of war there, how they were hoodwinked, how they were lied to, how they were manipulated into going to that war, and how they've seen young Cubans die all around them. Is that what a government should be doing? You know what? Under the Republic, Cuban troops were not sent to World War II. Because those governments of the Republic that Castro says were, U.S. puppets, they had the guts to say, no, I'm not sending my troops to World War II. All right? No Cuban troops went to Korea. And there was pressure for all American allies to go to Korea. The Republic did not send its troops to die in Korea or to fight in Korea. And that was for the good guys. That was for the U.S. But Castro hasn't followed that rule. Everywhere the Russians have had a proxy war, they've sent Cuban troops. Young men, young women who've died for a cause that's not Cuba's cause, everywhere around the world. Angola, Ethiopia, Algeria. How did that benefit Cuba? And now Russia, which is shameful for Cubans to be participating in an imperialist aggression against the people of Ukraine. So my people have had a very sad story for the past 66 years. It's been a lonely fight to have the world know it. Too many people enamored of the symbol and not of the reality. Too many people, intellectuals, who needed to prove socialism was successful, so they invented a story about Cuba. They invented a social society that worked. But when you look at it very, very close, when you really look at it, you say, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work here. It was just a symbol that was needed. A symbol, a narrative, a story that was spewed that's wrong, that has no basis in fact. I'm getting really fired up. So
that's why I'm here. That's why I got you here. We need you out here, man. I need you. Now, this is no holds bar in the tape deck. I need people like so because I told you, you're in Florida. You got a team out here. I'm a lonely man out here just trying to bring what I can. So I really appreciate you.
I see all these people claiming they're progressives, claiming they're leftists, and they're applying racist categories to the Cuban people.
Oh, I know. Trust me, I know. But it's like I can't be Rambo. I need an 18.
Bro, we're here to help you. You know, the colonial mentality, the imperial colonial Spanish mentality was to tell Cubans, put into their minds that they were too black, too Chinese, too poor to ever rule themselves.
Yeah.
That's the same thing these progressives are saying. No, Cubans can only function under a communist family dictatorship that has held no free elections for 66 years. That's what you think of us?
Yep.
That's what you think? What do you think we are? Savages?
They don't think highly of us.
No, they don't.
They don't think highly of us. And,
they don't.
We'll talk behind the scenes, but this morning was a perfect example.
If you love somebody, you want them to grow. You want them to fly. You want them to succeed. You want to see them at the full plenitude of their beauty. You don't want to keep them down with their head stuck in the sand.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want to tell people, my audience, because, again, it sounds like a broken record, but one of the issues that people think that Cuba has to, fight for is the embargo. Can you tell people the myth of the embargo and how it is really not an embargo?
Okay, I'm going to start by telling you the embargo is part of something called the Cuban Liberty Act, which regulates U.S. policy towards Cuba. And it aligns U.S. policy towards Cuba with the attainment of democracy in Cuba, something I'm very much in favor of. U.S. policy should always be aligned with democracy in Cuba. And the times it didn't do that, tragedy ensued. Let me tell you what are the three conditions for the lifting of the embargo according to U.S. law. Mind you, the embargo does not cover agriculture. The embargo does not cover culture. The embargo does not cover medicine. All right? The only thing the embargo does is bar the U.S. from financial entanglements with the regime in Cuba. And that's in the protection of the U.S. taxpayer because these people don't pay their debts. They have creditors the world over. If they were a blockaded country, how can they owe so many billions in foreign debt? How can they owe so much to Japan and Europe and Russia and China? They couldn't because they're not blockaded. Now, what are the three conditions for the lifting of the U.S. embargo? They're very simple. Release of all political prisoners. Legalization of Cuban civil society, including labor unions and political parties. A chronogram for free elections. Which one of those don't Cubans have the right to? Which one is it that we don't have a right to? Aren't we full human beings? How come everybody else has a right to these three and we don't? So when you talk to me about the embargo, I think you should ask, hey, Castro regime, why don't you do these three? If you so love the Cuban people, why can't they pick their own leaders? Why should they fear being in prison for their beliefs? Why can't there be a light at the end of the tunnel that says, hey, look, this is the peaceful way to get out of this crisis. Let's have these elections where all political parties can participate and Cubans have their full rights and liberties restored. But no, the regime doesn't do that because the regime is an ideological state run by a main family with some satellite families like a capo mafia regime to feed their lifestyle and to feed their status as members of the global elite.
There's you said something this morning because I listened partially of the interview you did this morning with Alberto. Shout out to Alberto. a lot of people, the Cuban community was pissed when the little lifting that Obama did with the embargo, the light lift that he gave. There was something that you said that I didn't even know that happened. I want you to tell my audience. There was how much money did the Cuban government got over tourism? It was like what, 800?
Oh, that's a good point.
Please tell my audience about what happened with the lifting.
President Obama, let me tell you, President Obama gave the regime almost everything they wanted. Everything that the law allowed him to give. Mm-hmm. He said, look, here's the openness to start a new relationship. We're doing all this stuff. We're opening all doors so you can take steps towards us. Right? I think that was naive on the part of the president because the regime didn't move an inch. They took what they got and they stayed the same. Right? Mm-hmm. The repression, the political prisoners, the censorship, the anti-Americanism, none of that changed.
Yeah.
Right? Over 3 years, as part of the Obama opening towards that regime, cruise tourism was allowed from the U.S. to Cuba. From the U.S. to Cuba. Right? Mm-hmm. They estimate that no less than $900 million entered the Cuban economy as a result of U.S. cruise tourism to Cuba. Mm-hmm. In those 3 years, of that $900 million that entered the state, and Cubans in the islands say this, and I repeat it all the time, how many hospitals were built? How many schools were restored? How many salaries were raised? The state does all this in Cuba. How many potholes were fixed in streets? How much medical care was made available to Cubans for real? Because if you're a Cuban trying to get medical care, you're going to get very poor medical care. If
but
you're
it's free.
Foreigner,
but it's free. It's free.
It's not free. It's paid with it's paid for with your freedom for not the doctors. The doctors are very good. Cuba has very good doctors. We have a medical tradition going back to the 19th century. Mm-hmm. It's not the doctors. It's a system that's designed for foreigners. A Bostonian goes to Cuba for medical care with their money, and they'll get the best.
Yeah.
Cubans don't have that. So where does the money go? Europe has given that regime 10 billion euros in the past 3 years. Where? I think the Cuban people haven't seen a penny. Saudi Arabia just gave that regime $400 million to fix the issues with water in eastern Cuba. They haven't seen the first drop, literally. The Russian Minister of Industries, he told the Cubans, hey, we gave you a 750 million ruble credit. I think it was rubles or dollars. I don't know what that was. Yeah. I don't remember right now. To fix the electrical industry. Nothing happened. Where is it? So it's a corrupt regime. It's a tyrannical regime. It's a blight on the Cuban people. It's a threat to the U.S. internally. And I urge you not to support it. Don't support it. That's bad karma to support something as evil as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful statement, man. 100 thank yous. So I guess I got to ask you, why you even came to Boston? What was the event? What was the reason why we hold you hostage here in Boston?
Well, I came to Boston for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, because Regla Gonzalez invited us, because October 10th is a very special day when Cuba's flag of independence flew. When the Cuban people rose up in rebellion and became one, the nation became perfected through that uprising because the principles and the ideals of that day are still very much alive for Cubans. So it's a beautiful day. Boston is a key city in the history of freedom worldwide. Boston is a cradle of liberty, not just for the U.S., for the world. And to be here and see that Cuban flag rise on October 10th, it's something wonderful. And I also came to meet your mom because she's done a very good job, man, of raising you as a good man, as a man of freedom, as a patriot. And I told her when I spoke with her on the phone with Regla.
Shout out to Val. Shout out to Val. Let me see if she wants to get to the thing. Hold on, give me a second. I'm gonna do something real spontaneous. Bear with me.
All right.
Something you barely see in something you barely see in the tape deck. Hold up. Regla, you want to talk to the audience real quick? You want to talk real quick? Huh? Do you want to talk? How long? 2 minutes. Just talk about Sunday. Huh? Just talk about Sunday. Well, I'm sharing the moment here with my auntie right here / mama, Regla. I want to say thank you for having Orlando come over here. I tried, I fought a lot to get here to the event at City Hall, but, anytime you give me a call, and I made the speech with Orlando, anytime these two call me up, I can't say no to them. They're like...
And we have to thank your boss for allowing you to do this.
Yeah, shout out to Brett.
Okay.
Shout out to Brett making it happen. So can you tell why you got us all here today for Sunday's event?
Well, basically, we're raising our Cuban flag for our 33rd year. En inglés estamos hablando,
Sí,
¿verdad?
en inglés, we can explain.
For 33 years, and we have decided to recognize people that have excelled, that has been pioneers defending our civil rights, our human rights, our freedom for Cuba. And that's what we're all gathering this weekend. El Grito de Yara, que is the cry of Yara, which is celebrates 1868 when los terratenientes cubanos free all our slaves to join into La Guerra Chiquita, the 10 years little war we call them, to fight to free Cuba from the Spaniards.
Yes. So, and how long have been raising the flag in Massachusetts? How long
This
you
is
been?
our 33rd year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna keep doing it till we can't do it no more. And you know, anytime.
It's going to take you and Jordan to do it.
Well,
when I'm gone.
that's for another
When I'm
conversation.
gone.
That's for another conversation. But I want to say thank you for everything that you do.
Of course.
And-
Thank you to you.
Yeah, and I gotta have you on the show here sometime to get your story.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Sure.
so I'll definitely give you a call.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Orlando, before I get out of here, what's next for you?
What's next is we're working very hard so the European Union stops subsidizing the regime in Cuba. It's not fair. It's not just to the Cuban people. It's not just to the Ukrainian people. We're working on a campaign of prayer for the salvation of Cuba. It's being carried out inside and outside Cuba. We urge you to pray for Cuba's salvation. If you have a spiritual inclination, we ask you to share with us this prayer. Not a call to action, just sharing with you something we're doing. And we have been developing inside and outside Cuba a plan of national salvation for the first 2 years of the transition to have everything in place so that the transition comes out perfect and Cuba can have full freedom and democracy.
Okay. Well, again, Orlando, thank you for all the contributions enough to the community. Thank you for everything. Thank you for coming through. Thank you for any time I had a call to have anything on the tape deck, you came through without a problem. Thank you for inviting me a couple of weeks ago to say that speech. I got to get that video so Mom can see it. Anything you need from me, you know I'm one call away. And I'm here to fight the good fight with you, man. 100 thank yous.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I admire Rayla a great deal, and I think very highly of you, Michael.
Thank you.
Patria y vida,
Patria y vida.
Patria vida.
Cuba libre.
Padre vida. So it's your boy Cuban Mic. You listen 102.9 tape deck. You can catch me here every Friday here from 6 to 7. I'll catch you here, same tape deck time, same tape deck channel. Padre vida. Let's go.